These are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. Thank you for joining Hanapin today. For our webinar, we are going to be discussing the art of transparency, better reporting for better results. The presenters today are me. I'm Christine Hyman. I'm the client manager here at Hanapin Marketing. I've facilitated client relationships for 20 years, and you can follow me on my Twitter handle at Ankamom if you want. It's really quite boring. I just tweet stuff about my kids and baked goods, and I'm really embarrassed about my Twitter handle. When I joined Twitter, I thought, like, hey, Ankamom, that sounds cool. It's like one of my dogs, and I'm a mom, and now I'm totally embarrassed by it. So follow if you feel the need. I also have with me Haley. Haley, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Christine. I've been in digital marketing for over 6 years now. I started in Mindshare in Chicago, where I spent 4 years in paid search. After that, I spent a year in display at Microsoft, and prior to Hanapin, I was at Digitas, back in paid search, also in Chicago. I'm really excited to speak on this topic today. It is my first ever webinar, so hopefully you find it as valuable as we do. Also, do not follow me on Twitter, because the only thing I have done on Twitter is complain about Chipotle, and I'm not kidding, but please do follow Christine.
Oh, or not. And it's my first webinar too, so we are webinar rookies. Be
Woo!
Nice. If you want to join the conversation today, you need to include the hashtag ThinkPPC in your tweets, and it's been a big joke all week about the hashtag sound. I don't know if you all have seen it yet. You probably have, but the hashtag bit by Justin Timberlake and Jimmy Fallon is probably one of their top 3 finest moments of their bromance to date. So please Google that if you haven't seen it, and I think you'll really enjoy it. If you want, you can also use the webinar question box to send us questions as well. So before we get started on the actual reporting information, we just have a couple of poll questions for you. The first is, how long have you been in PPC? Choose A for less than 1 year, B for 1 to 3 years, C for 3 to 5 years, and D for 5+ years. As I mentioned in my first slide, I have 20 years of client relation experience. I've actually been in PPC for 18 months, so I would be letter B. As we heard from Haley, she would be letter D. I joked about the other day that D stands for dinosaur when it comes to PPC. So you said 6 years, right, Haley?
Correct, yeah. So 6 years is a very long time to be in PPC. I left for a year and tried display. After that year, I was, let's just say, pretty starved for data. So I love the amount of data that is available in PPC, and all of that instant gratification. So yeah, 6 years, quite a long time for PPC.
Well, just to let you know, you are in about 15% of the audience who have 5+ years experience. It looks like less than 1 year, we're at about 18%. 1 to 3 years, which is my category, has the highest number of joiners today at 42%, and then 3 to 5 years, there are 24% of the listeners. Our second poll question today is, how do you manage your accounts? Now that we got to know a little bit about your PPC experience, we want to know, how you manage the accounts. A, you manage it yourself. B, you're part of a team that manages it. C, you outsource your account management. Or D, you're rethinking how your account is managed. Hey, Haley, while we wait for the results of this, I just was curious on what your favorite part of working for Hanapin is.
So I've only been at Hanapin now for just almost 6 months, but I would say my favorite part about working at Hanapin is the foundation of sharing information that this company is built upon. I've not worked at a company that has had such a strong impact in the social network, per se, of PPC. This is still a new concept to many people, so I give Hanapin a lot of credit for having one of the best, if I do say so myself, PPC blogs around.
Awesome. I wanted to give you guys the results of how you manage your accounts. It looks like we have a pretty big split between two. About 45% of people manage their account themselves, and 53% are part of a team that manages it. Now, there is 3% that outsource the account management, but that are the totals for how we manage our account. To get started, I think Haley's going to give us a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about today.
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, and as I said, I'm really excited about this being my first webinar. I hope you find this information valuable and helpful. Today we're going to go over a couple of things that you need to understand before you actually start to think about or prepare reporting. We're going to talk a little bit about the actual data that you're pulling and how that data should be prioritized, where that data comes from, and how to build valuable and impactful insights. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to pull that all together. And at the end, we'll give you some time to ask us some questions, and let's get started.
So the first thing that you want to do when you are thinking about reporting is ask yourself, who am I delivering this information to? What kind of information do they need or expect? If you're an advertiser, you might be presenting to a marketing team, CEO, president, investors, any type of owner. If you're an agency, you may be presenting to your PPC contact, a marketing contact, again, CEO, president. We often change the scope of the content that we report on depending on who's looking at the data. Sometimes people are very top level and just need to know a top level report. Other times people really want an in-depth analysis of what's going on. So you have to think about, who you're talking to, what type of information they need, and just remember too that depending on if that person owns the company, they may be looking at the data a little bit differently than someone that maybe is working for a large company that, hey, I have this much money to spend in PPC this month. So you need to keep all those things in mind when you are preparing reports. So now that you know who you're reporting to, the next thing you need to know is who you're reporting on. You need to know your customer. So you need to make sure so you understand what drives the business, and that means understanding the consumer's purchase journey. So depending on what type of thing you're trying to sell or promote, it's going to be different on understanding the purchase journey. Either they're in an active evaluation, they actually purchase, the post-purchase experience, or something that stimulates them to purchase again. If it's a client that has, or if your account, you sell like software or something, it might be just like a one-time purchase, and you might have to try to figure out other ways of bringing someone back in, whether it be a new version, an update. But if it's something like you sell personalized items in an e-com shop, that type of purchase might happen over and over again. Maybe at the holidays, it may be birthdays, it may be Father's Day. So you have a lot of different times that you can influence that person. So these are just important things to know when you're looking at reporting. You want to know who you're going to report to, who you're going to report on, and how they behave.
That's great information, Christine. I think one of the really important things to remember when knowing your consumer is understanding or making sure that you don't actually skew the data. So for some clients, 10 conversions may be a lot. For example, the B2B kind of software company that you referenced. For other clients, 1,000 leads may be just an average month for let's say, a real estate company or something like that. So understanding what to expect before you kind of dig in and position the data is very important.
Something else I just thought of too is sometimes you want to take credit for something that's happening in the account, like, hey, we're reporting this data and everything looks great, and you're kind of pointing it to PPC, things that you've done in PPC. You also have to keep in mind other channels or other avenues or other things that are going on in the company, because sometimes I've been in a situation before where I've taken credit for, like, hey, sales are up on this particular product, isn't that great? PPC is doing really great. And then I was heard like, oh yeah, we were running a sale on our website of that product. So you got to really know everything about what's happening, so you don't take credit for where it's not due, because you can kind of lose credibility that way.
Great point. Okay, so next we're going to talk about knowing your business. So make sure you understand the business model. This means understanding the pathway to conversion, both online and offline. So what are some of the steps that a consumer would take on the website prior to the final conversion? So some of these could look like sample downloads, form fills, white paper downloads, etc. So it's important to understand all of the steps that can be taken before that final conversion happens. Understand the conversion rates between these various steps. So If you're unable to actually report against that final step online, if you can figure out what is needed in order to get that desired end result, you're much more likely to be able to optimize accurately within your PPC accounts. Is it possible to track every step within the process online? So as I just mentioned, sometimes we don't have all of that data available to us. The consumer could be calling in, they could be going into the actual store. So these are all important things to consider when you're building your reports.
So I know you're probably asking what car racing has to do with PPC, but you need to understand where you stand. You need to know where you stand. PPC is fast moving like these cars here on the racetrack, and new competitors can enter and exit the space and change the ability to maintain the performance that you've been seeing for previous months. Knowing where you stand and what's causing the shift in performance can help inform your strategy. In fact, I recently had a customer say to me, you know, PPC couldn't have changed that much in 15 months, and I was kind of taken aback. Like 15 months, that's forever in PPC, you know, 15 days, 15 hours. I mean, it moves pretty quickly. And we all know that you know, PPC not changing in 15 months is a pretty false statement. So how are you going to know where you stand? You can take advantage of some free tools online like AdWords auction sites or SEMrush. You can keep an eye on your CPCs. If the cost per click suddenly goes up or your position's fallen, there's a chance that someone else is taking your spot or really bidding you up to get the spot that they want. Be prepared to apply this information to your reports. You want to be able to explain why it's necessary when building insights to the data. I have a client who really always wants to have the #1 position, and he's really focused on it. Then he started to be concerned with costs and how much he was spending for leads, and we had to have a discussion about the fine line between position and cost. And you know, you can't always afford to have your cake and eat it too, basically. The competitive discussion is something that you have to continuously do while you're looking at information, because it's definitely something that can affect the data.
Absolutely. And I also find that competitor information, no matter what level you're presenting to, so whether it's just the PPC team on the client side or if it's the CEO, everyone finds that competitor information extremely valuable. So it keeps kind of everybody on the same page and up to date on what's happening within their industry, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree. So all this competitive discussion leads to our poll question number 3. And that is, how often do you monitor what your competitors are doing in PPC? Do you look at it weekly, monthly, quarterly, or you're not currently doing this at all? Haley, do you have a feeling on like how often you want to look at competitive information?
Yeah, so I tend to find that looking at it quarterly is the best view to kind of to see some large changes. So yes, you can look at it weekly, yes, you can look at it monthly, but to get a really good frame of what your competitors are doing, how much they're spending, where they're focusing their PPC efforts, looking at it quarterly gives you a really good kind of snapshot of that. It also gives you time to build a strategy around how to test similar ad copy, or how to pull some of their strategies in line with what you're doing. So
I agree, and I think, as I mentioned on the earlier slide, like, yeah, if something happens and things are changing and you're trying to figure out what's going on, looking at that a little, you know, when something like that happens is definitely beneficial. But I think as an overall strategy, quarterly makes sense. As far as our answers to our poll, we have 10% that look at it weekly, 19% that look monthly, 32% that look currently, and then 39% that aren't currently doing it at all. And I think what's interesting there is if you're not doing it, you're missing out on a lot of insight that looking at it could really bring to your account.
absolutely.
So I know you're probably wondering why Tom Cruise is in a PPC slide deck. Well, he's here to remind us about what's important to report. He wants us to show me the money. In order to prove the performance, you need to understand the big picture of things. What metrics are going to be needed, how are they going to inform our optimizations, and how are we going to most effectively increase the revenue, the money. So what is really important? If you ask Mr. Monopoly, it's all about the Benjamins. But we need to find out how urgent the need is. You need to ask your clients, like, what's the goal based on? Are we breaking even? Are we growing revenue? Are we looking at it versus a different time frame? You know, what's really moving this need, and we just need as much information as possible. And then what metric needs to be provided to get the most accurate measurement of the goal? You know, different people like to look at things in a different way, and you just have to make sure that you are providing them with the right information. So there's a couple of examples on how something can start off like in education where, you know, we really focus on cost per lead. How many leads are we getting? What's the cost per lead? That can then change into cost per enrollment. And then finally, like a cost per start. So, you know, what started off as, hey, I got this lead, and I spent this much money on it. Well, out of those leads, only so many enrolled, and out of those enrollments or enrollees, only so many started. So that number changes throughout that. You really need to have a handle on what's important. Like a satellite cable provider, same type of thing. Cost per lead, cost per sale, and then the cost per install. And I found that usually that last number, although the first number, the CPL, is what seems to be the most important, when you get down to it, it's that final number. Like, how much did it actually cost to get that client, or to get that sale, or to get that start? So those are just important things to really keep in mind when you're looking at data and you're trying to provide information. Also, as I kind of mentioned earlier, you want to look at what date range you should use for comparisons, whether it's a month over month, a year over year. I know in some clients that I have are pretty seasonal, and we tend to look at a year over year view as opposed to a month over month view. But other clients, if you're like trying to grow revenue, a month over month view would probably be more beneficial. If it's like, you know, we want to grow revenue this year, not necessarily over last year, but, you know, this much month over month.
Absolutely. I know looking at data in January can make us all think that we're doing a really, really great job in PPC. But yeah, that's when that year-over-year data becomes very important. And I just love that Jerry Maguire image. I feel like we've all been in that situation where we're on the other end of a phone thinking, I just looked at my reporting and we're showing growth. How can this not be the case for the client? Understanding what it takes to really put money in hands for our client can help you prevent this from happening. And it may take some time, but it's definitely worth it. And your clients will be happy that you're taking the initiative to really understand their business model. So this could take a lot of questions, a lot of phone calls, but like I said, it's always worth it.
So on a side note, before we start, I'm a little bit older, and I saw this slide, and I'm not really old, just a little bit older. And I saw the slide, and I'm like, is that the Goonies? And Haley laughed at me. She thought it was funny that I was even asking if that was the Goonies or not. So
yeah. So prior to these past 18 months that she's been at Hanapin, she was actually living under a rock. So for everyone else,
Haley, thanks for pointing that out. I appreciate it.
So next, now that you know where you're going, how are you going to get there? So in order to tie performance back to a PPC keyword or campaign, what setup is needed on the back end? So this is where things can get a little bit tricky. So now that you understand your consumer, your business, and what is the most important metric to report on, now you need to figure out how to include it accurately within your reports. So understand where the data is and how to access it. So first, are you able to accurately tie conversions to the PPC account? So an attribution model or a source report is something that most clients do have available or have pulled and frequently look at. This may, however, be something that they don't usually do. So you may have to take those reins and start the ownership of that project. Where do you pull the data from? So is it a call tracking system? Is it a CRM tool? And are you currently pulling that into your reporting source? So are you using analytics, and are you able to track all of that revenue that's being brought in to give your PPC campaigns the credit for it? So then capabilities and limitations. So how granular can you get? Are you able to optimize based on keyword? Can you tell which keyword actually drove a phone call? Can you tell which keyword actually drove a form fill? In many cases, this is not available, but in some cases, with a little bit of extra work, you can definitely get that information. what access is needed. So you may need to reach out separately to the client or to even an IT person within the client's company to help you get the access that you needed. And all of these steps will help you kind of get to a more accurate reporting in the end. So this again will require some patience. The setup is a pain, but leads to more clear and accurate reporting, and it's again very worth it. Sometimes it helps to map out the flow of information so you can identify where the black holes are or the opportunities that you have to connect the dots.
So I know you're probably sitting back thinking about eating your lunch, or if you're actually eating it already, you may be just wanting to know, like Fred Armisen does when he impersonates Joy Behar and says, "So what? Who cares?"
That was good, Christine.
Thank you. I've worked on that all night. Just remember that the data will only be as valuable as your ability to make changes based on it. So how will that happen? By formulating a key takeaway. And what's the key takeaway going to be? It's going to be a fact or a point or an idea that you want someone to remember. You want them to walk away from that report thinking of that thing. To build a key takeaway, you're going to ask yourself 3 questions. What happened? What is this data showing me? What happened? Why do we believe it happened? And then what are we going to do about it in the future? If you walk away not answering those 3 questions, the person reading the report or listening to your reporting is going to walk away wondering, what's been left out. So if you tell them what happens, they're going to say, well, why do you think it happened? Or what are you going to do to make it not happen again, or make it happen again, depending on if the results are negative or positive. If you get the what happened and why you believe it happened, again, like, so what? Who cares? What are you going to do about it? What kind of key learnings are you going to have to move forward with in the future?
Yeah, and I think this step definitely speaks to the importance of all of the previous steps, which have kind of brought us to this point. So without understanding everything that we've already covered, you'll have a hard time figuring out what is actually doable based on the information. So for example, if you can only get call tracking by engine, you will not be able to optimize based on that phone conversion beyond basically just designating budgets by engine. Those insights should be equivalent to an executive summary. So the highlights, the cliff notes, if you will. So you should have a clear picture of what has happened and what you're going to do in the coming weeks or months. So for example, an example of a well-written insight would be last month conversion rate was down 12% due to customers being in between paychecks, and we are increasing our focus on remarketing over the next weeks to make sure we re-engage this consumer when they get that paycheck. So I do have some clients that fluctuate quite a bit based on when their very specific consumer is getting paid. So this came out of an actual real kind of client example.
Something else I wanted to point out, that if you only do 1 or 2 of these questions and the person you're reporting the information to doesn't say anything, just don't think that they're not thinking it or they're not wondering it. Just because they might go, oh, okay, doesn't mean that they're not like asking themselves these things, because these are just like a natural order of how you would process data and how you would think about what it means to the future. So just keep that in mind as well.
Yep, sometimes radio silence is not a good thing. Okay, so after all of that, he caught it, and now he's asking himself, now what? I want to ask everyone, is this a part of your monthly reports?
Wah, wah, wah.
So many of you that have already started pulling reports may see something like this on a weekly or monthly basis.
I'm guilty. I hate to say it.
And I just want to say the first step in admitting that you have irrelevant data in your reports is admitting that there's a problem. While this can be useful information, having it recurring monthly or weekly on your report is a waste of time and probably a waste of space.
I think if you definitely have an initiative like, hey, we're going to spend more money in Bing, or we're going to do something, that could be important. But yeah, I think you're right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know you're right. Like that. Gee, really? 73% Google, 27% Bing. I would have never guessed unless you show me that pie chart. Oh my gosh.
Exactly, and you'd be surprised how many reports I've looked at that have included this.
Yeah.
So based on that, we want to make sure that we're formatting for value, so no wasted space. Your reporting should be well thought out and based on what matters most. So get right to the point. Don't wait till the end of your report to get bad news. Put it right out there so you can tie everything back to how you are going to improve performance. And the same thing goes for good news. If you're doing well, lead with that and let the rest of the report speak to how you did it and what you learned. This should also lead into what you will do to continue that positive trend. Sometimes there's so many options for how we can present the data. So for example, trend lines or graphs. Trend lines or bar graphs can help demonstrate progress towards or away from a goal. Another helpful tool could be layering the data in order to tell a better story. So an example would be spend and conversion. So if your spend is remaining consistent and your conversions are increasing, this can depict a clear win for efficiency. Click-through rate and conversion rate. So if you are doing CRO for a client, or if you're in-house and asking your agency to do CRO for you, and your click-through rate remains consistent, but your conversion rate is increasing, something is changing on your site that is helping to push people down that funnel.
So I just wanted to take a second to say, like, I'm responsible for a large portion of reporting at Hanapin, and even I'm guilty of showing some information that's not necessarily the most insightful. I probably have a report or two that still has that graph on it, even though I've been looking at this information and talking about it for a long time. And I will definitely go back into the reports that I've already have put together that we put out weekly or monthly or whatever, and make some changes and really try to think about, like, you know, now when I first put the reports together, maybe I didn't know exactly what the client was looking for or know what the business was about. But now that, like, we've been in it a while, some more insightful information should be added. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the hardest part is going back and doing the extra work on top of everybody's already busy schedule to rework something that's working. I heard a saying, the hardest thing to do is change a successful company. So the hardest thing to do in this case would be to change successful reporting if you think it's successful at the time. And so one last note, pie chart. So the pie chart we just showed, obviously not a lot of takeaways on that. Pie charts can be useful when you're breaking up data, for example, by geo, so by state. If you've never done this before, try doing that in your reporting and see where the majority of your conversions are coming from, or where your most efficient source of conversions are coming from, and that can help to inform a actual geo-targeting strategy or a bidding strategy based on that information.
So now comes the exciting part. And now, of course, like, I've been doing my little impressions all day, so I'll have to do it. It's alive! The reporting, that is. So is this reporting useful? No, like, really, is it useful? Like, you know, we were just talking about on the last slide, it's like, I know I have some reports out there that some of the information isn't useful. Now, I think the bulk of the report is. But just remember, a reporting template should be a living, breathing document that can change. Because the focus changes, so can the reporting. And like I had mentioned, because now that I understand the business better and we're doing different things in the account, we can change the report as well. Remember to set some reminders to revisit the reporting. Having an open discussion with whoever you're reporting to. You know, ask if it's useful. If like you're sending them a 6-page report, but they're really only looking at the first 2 pages, do they really want to keep seeing that information? I had a client who had a big report, like 6, 7 pages, and the last 2 pages were about, like, keywords and ads that were like their conversion rate on keywords and ads, and we never talked about it. And I just took it off because I thought, well, we never talk about it, no big deal. And the week I sent it without it, he's like, hey, where are those keywords and ads? Like, what happened? And I didn't realize that they were as important as they were. So if there's something that you always need to pull manually that could be included in the report, you should do that. And then you should try to ask yourself if the data helps with the PPC strategy for the week. Know that you can change your reporting based on feedback. Like I had mentioned, pulling something out and then having someone say, wait, I was using that. I've also had a client that we went through like 3 iterations of a report before it was how we wanted to see the data. So I was sending him stuff. He was like, yeah, it's okay, but can you add this? And then I'd send it, yeah, a little bit better, but can you add this? So it's not like you can't take it personally. People process information differently, and you just have to accommodate that. Also, make sure that you look at what you're presenting from the view of the person it's prepared for. So if you present to an e-com client, they won't act like the Frankenstein here and go like, where's the return on ad spend? If you hadn't thought about that already, which you should have. But I'm just saying, just like really think about what kind of questions they might ask or what might be the most important to them.
Absolutely. Great point, and this is definitely, I'll admit as well, something that I haven't been the best at times, but I do find that when we say set quarterly reminders, most literally, I mean set a reminder on your calendar, because we're all very busy. We get lost in the weeds. There's tons of details that we have to remember on a day-to-day basis. Set the calendar reminder, bring it up on your status call. Just get these questions answered, and hopefully that will help.
So we have one more poll question for you. And it's basically, would you like help with your PPC accounts and management? The 4 choices below is if you're interested in PPC management, we handle the day-to-day management of your account, an account audit where we will review your account for optimizations, a PPC retainer where we can handle only specific needs within your account, or a free solutions blueprint where we can look at your account, provide some analysis and consultation, and we will do the blueprint for accounts with 20K in ad spend or greater. So it looks like we have a couple of questions that we want to go ahead and answer. So I'll let Haley, she's been reading the questions, I'll let her start.
Cool. So yeah, we got a great question. Which tools are best? So I think the examples that were given in this question were those competitive tools that can help us kind of get a feel for what our competitors are doing. I would say if you haven't done this yet, try a free tool online, try SEMrush, look at your auction insights, and then look up examples of paid search ads in the wild. So do searches on the keywords that are driving the most conversions at the most efficient rate, and find out exactly what your competitors are doing. What position are they in? Should you be aligning that messaging? Or is there an opportunity to show a better, more impactful message? So yeah, I would recommend starting with a free tool and then branching out to maybe spending some money on something more advanced.
So one of the other questions is, how long should a report be? So that is better answered from who you're trying to prepare it for. Like I had mentioned, some people, maybe CEOs or just a certain personality, might just like to see something top level. It could be a page. Some people like all the keyword data, all the ad data. That could be 6, 7 pages. We have a weekly report that goes off that's like 12 pages because the client has a lot of different products. They want to look at a comparison of the last 7 days and the last 30 days for each of the product groupings. Also, like what they're spending, where their clicks are coming from. So, that's really up to you and up to the person that you're presenting the information to.
That's a great point, Christine. So one of our next questions is, let's see, what do you feel is the most important report for an e-commerce retailer? So definitely, if you are an e-commerce retailer, you're probably most concerned with tracking your return on ad spend. Making sure that you can pull that revenue data into analytics or whatever tool you are using is extremely important. So with PPC, we can drive a lot of free coupons or free sample downloads or form fills, which is great, but they might not always be the most valuable or highest value source of traffic. So making sure that you pull in that very final metric that is putting money in your hand is the most important, I would say.
Something else that I was going to say with, I totally lost my mind.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm sorry. I had like something really good, like an anecdote from my real life, and it totally slipped my mind. So that's, hey, that's a live webinar for you.
So we can just go ahead and answer maybe this next question, which is how do you deal with the fact that SEMrush, SpyFu, etc. can be unreliable in terms of data? So I would challenge you to figure out why you think that the data is unreliable. Is this based on searches that you're doing, and in an example search, are you seeing a competitor show up third where SpyFu tends to show them in second? Or you're assuming that you know more about their spend levels than the tool does. I'm not going to say that this isn't possible, but I would just challenge you to really look at why you actually think that the data is inaccurate, and understand that the results that you would be getting on your end, if that's what you're basing it on, could be based on your search history and things you clicked on in the past, and it could also be subject to a lot of other variables such as match type and budget, time of day, the geo-targeting that's in place, and things like that.
So as soon as you started talking, I remembered what I was going to say.
Okay.
And it might not even be important or relevant, and maybe no one might not care. Like, so what? Who cares? But when I was thinking about the e-commerce question about reporting, I tend, like what I report, like I tend to report clicks, impressions, click-through rate, because you want to kind of know about the traffic. I report on transactions, revenue, and then return on ad spend, as well as spend, because you need that for the return on ad spend as well. And also, depending on what kind of client it is, you might want to take a look at average order value, because that can really guide some of your PPC strategy as well. So
Absolutely.
that's what I had. Okay, one more question. Let's try, what tools do you use to put together a report? And I think we touched base a little bit on that. The actual report itself, you can make something up in Excel that you have some information, you do a pivot table, you put the information into an easily read spreadsheet, and then you can PDF it. It looks very professional. We also use Acquisio. Acquisio is our main reporting platform, and it is really good because you can set it up once, and you just pull it, weekly, daily, whenever you want. And if you need to make changes to it, it's pretty easy to just add columns to the specific data that's most important, or if the strategy changes and you need different information. So, okay, let's see. We have one last question, and then we're gonna have to wrap it up.
Sure. So I'll go ahead and take that, Christine. Okay. So can you provide some insight as to how SpyFu, SEMrush, and the other competitive tools decide who your competitors are? So if you're using a free tool like SEMrush, this will likely be based on your domain. So the amount of the keywords that your domain is showing up for within the ad copy, it would basically pull that overlap and determine who your competitors are. Now, this can also be determined based on a specific list of keywords. So if you're using a tool such as AdGuru, which is a tool you would be paying for, you can actually set, if you have different categories within your business and you want to, let's say, see how just the shoe category of your e-commerce store is performing, you can take those top shoe specific keywords and see who is competing against your domain ad copy on those search results.
Yeah, I agree. That's really great. So, okay, so if you have more questions, just know that you can get a free solutions blueprint from Hanapin Marketing at the information here, or contact us directly for webinar feedback at marketing@hanapinmarketing.com. We want to thank you very much for attending our very first webinar. Remember, #ThinkPPC. Make sure you guys look up that video because it'll give you a little chuckle. And thanks, Haley, for going through this rookie moment with me. I appreciate it.
I wouldn't want to co-present with anyone else, Christine.
You're going to make me cry. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.